Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation Cracks. Vincent Caldwell stood 6 feet 3 inches of pure intimidation, his steel-gray eyes reflecting the same coldness that had built his construction empire from nothing. At 45, he commanded respect through fear and results, never through charm or empty promises. His hands, scarred from years of manual labor before becoming a millionaire, gripped the hospital corridor wall as the doctor delivered the words that would shatter his carefully constructed world. "I'm sorry, Mr. Caldwell. Trevor didn't make it." His 17-year-old son, the golden boy with a full scholarship to MIT, was gone. The drunk driver who had T-boned Trevor's car walked away with minor injuries, while his son lay crushed in twisted metal. Vincent's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ground audibly. He had built his fortune by never showing weakness, by crushing anyone who stood in his way. Yet here he stood powerless against death itself. Returning home to their sprawling estate in the hills, Vincent expected to find his wife of 20 years, Diana, devastated. Instead, he found her in the study, composed and calculating, seated across from their family attorney, Harold Grimsby, a nervous man who had handled their affairs for a decade. "Vincent," Diana said without looking up from the documents spread across the mahogany desk. Her auburn hair was perfectly styled, her makeup untouched by tears. "We need to discuss Trevor's college fund." The $160,000 account had been untouched, waiting for their son's freshman year. Vincent had started building it the day Trevor was born, adding to it with every successful project, every conquered competitor. "What's to discuss?" Vincent's voice carried the edge that made grown men step back. Diana finally met his eyes, and Vincent saw something that chilled him more than his son's death. Cold calculation where grief should have been. "I want you to transfer that money to my personal account. Trevor won't need it now, and I have plans." The silence in the room was deafening. Harold fidgeted with his pen, clearly uncomfortable with the direction this conversation was taking. "Plans?" Vincent's voice dropped to a whisper, a tone his employees knew meant someone was about to be destroyed. "I'm not staying in this mausoleum of a marriage, Vincent. I haven't been happy in years, and with Trevor gone." She shrugged as if discussing the weather. "There's nothing keeping me here." Vincent studied his wife's face, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time in years. Diana had been a waitress when they met, beautiful, ambitious, and eager to escape her mundane life. He had given her everything: luxury, status, security. Now, with her son's body not yet cold, she was already planning her exit strategy. "The money stays where it is," Vincent said finally. Diana's perfectly painted lips curved into a smile that held no warmth. "We'll see about that, darling." As Vincent left the study, his mind was already racing. 20 years in construction had taught him to read people, to spot weakness and exploit it. Diana's sudden boldness suggested she wasn't acting alone. Someone was backing her play, someone who didn't know the kind of man they were challenging. Vincent had built his empire by being more ruthless than his competitors, more unforgiving than his enemies. He had started with nothing but determination and a willingness to do whatever it took to win. Now, as he stood in his son's empty bedroom, surrounded by MIT acceptance letters and football trophies, he felt that familiar cold fury building inside him. Diana had made a fatal mistake. She had shown him her true nature at the worst possible moment, when grief and rage were consuming him. She wanted to play games with their dead son's money? Vincent would teach her what it meant to cross a man who had nothing left to lose. The war had begun, and Diana had no idea what kind of monster she had awakened. Chapter 2. The Betrayal Unveiled. The funeral was a masterpiece of small-town theater. Vincent stood granite-faced beside the casket, watching as Trevor's friends and teachers paid their respects. Diana played the grieving mother perfectly, dabbing at her eyes with a silk handkerchief while accepting condolences. But Vincent noticed what others missed, how her gaze kept drifting to a man standing at the back of the crowd. Bradley Morse was Trevor's guidance counselor, a smooth-talking 42-year-old who had always been too friendly with the parents, especially the mothers. Vincent had dismissed him as harmless, a divorced educator living paycheck to paycheck. Now, watching Bradley's subtle nods toward Diana, Vincent began to understand the game being played. After the service, as friends and family gathered at the Caldwell estate, Vincent excused himself to his home office. He pulled out his laptop and began researching Bradley Morse with the same methodical precision he used to destroy business competitors. What he found made his blood boil. Bradley had been having affairs with married women for years, always targeting wealthy wives in troubled marriages. 3 previous relationships had ended in divorces, each one leaving the husband financially devastated while Bradley disappeared with a substantial payout. The man was a professional homewrecker, and Vincent's grieving wife was his latest mark. A soft knock on the office door interrupted his investigation. Vincent's longtime business partner and closest friend, Marcus Rodriguez, entered carrying 2 glasses of whiskey. "Thought you might need this," Marcus said, setting the glass on the desk. At 48, Marcus was one of the few people Vincent trusted completely. They had started their construction company together in a garage, building it into a multi-million-dollar operation through blood, sweat, and strategic ruthlessness. "I need something stronger than whiskey," Vincent muttered, accepting the drink. "I saw how Diana was acting today," Marcus said carefully. "This isn't how a grieving mother behaves." Vincent showed Marcus the laptop screen, explaining what he had discovered about Bradley Morse. Marcus's face darkened as he absorbed the information. "That bastard," Marcus growled. "He's been grooming Diana for months, hasn't he?" "Probably started right after Trevor got his MIT acceptance," Vincent replied. "She knew the college fund was substantial. This whole thing was planned. What are you going to do?" Vincent closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair. "I'm going to give them exactly what they want. And then some." The next morning, Vincent's phone rang at 6 a.m. Harold Grimsby's nervous voice crackled through the speaker. "Vincent, I have some difficult news. Diana contacted me directly yesterday. She's filed for divorce and is demanding half of everything, including the business." Vincent had expected this, but hearing it confirmed still felt like a physical blow. "On what grounds?" "Irreconcilable differences. She's also claiming you've been emotionally abusive and that she deserved compensation for 20 years of, and I quote, living with a cold, unfeeling monster." Vincent almost laughed at the irony. He had been cold and calculating in business. Yes, but he had given Diana everything she had ever wanted. He had worked 18-hour days to build their fortune while she enjoyed the lifestyle it provided. "There's more," Harold continued reluctantly. "She wants the college fund transferred to her immediately as part of the divorce settlement. She's claiming it's marital property." "Let me make something very clear, Harold," Vincent said, his voice dropping to that dangerous whisper. "Diana will not get 1 penny of Trevor's money, and she sure as hell won't get half of what I built. If you even consider representing her in this, I'll destroy you professionally and personally. Are we understood?" "Why, yes, Vincent." "Completely understood." After hanging up, Vincent sat in silence for several minutes. Then he picked up his phone and made a call to someone he hadn't spoken to in 5 years, his brother Alex, a former Special Forces operator who now ran a private security firm specializing in discreet problem-solving. "Alex, it's Vincent. I need a favor." "Been wondering when you'd call," Alex replied, his voice carrying the same steel as Vincent's. "Heard about Trevor. I'm sorry. Diana's making a play for everything, and she's got help. I need information on a man named Bradley Morse, and I need it fast. Consider it done." "But, Vincent, if you're planning what I think you're planning, remember that some lines can't be uncrossed." Vincent stared out his office window at the swimming pool where Trevor had learned to swim, where they had spent countless summer afternoons planning the boy's future. "They crossed the line first, Alex. Now, they're going to learn what happens when you steal from a Caldwell." Chapter 3. The Boy at the Grave. Vincent drove to Hillcrest Cemetery as the sun began to set, needing solitude to process the destruction of his life. Trevor's grave was marked by a temporary stone, fresh flowers from the funeral still bright against the dark earth. Vincent knelt beside the plot, his hands clenched into fists. "I'm sorry, son," he whispered. "I couldn't protect you from that drunk bastard, and now your mother wants to steal the money I saved for your future. But I promise you this, she won't get away with it." A small sound made him look up. A boy, perhaps 12 years old, stood 20 feet away among the headstones. He was thin and pale, wearing clothes that had seen better days. When the boy turned toward him, Vincent's breath caught in his throat. The resemblance was impossible, yet undeniable. The boy had Trevor's eyes, bright blue and intelligent, and the same stubborn jawline that Vincent recognized in his own mirror. For a moment, grief and exhaustion made Vincent wonder if he was hallucinating. "You're Trevor's dad," the boy said, his voice soft but certain. Vincent stood slowly, his heart hammering. "Who are you?" "My name's Oliver Reed. Trevor was helping me with math at school. He said his dad was the strongest man he knew." The boy's words hit Vincent like a physical blow. Trevor had never mentioned tutoring anyone, but that was typical of his son, always helping others without seeking recognition. "How did you know Trevor?" Vincent asked, studying the boy's face. Oliver looked down at his worn sneakers. "My mom works 3 jobs, so I'm alone a lot after school. Trevor found me crying in the library one day because I was failing algebra. He started tutoring me for free, said smart kids should help each other." Vincent felt something crack inside his chest. Even with a full scholarship to MIT waiting, Trevor had been spending his free time helping a struggling kid no one else cared about. "He talked about you all the time," Oliver continued. "Said you built your company from nothing, that you taught him never to give up. He was really proud of you." "Where's your mother now?" Vincent asked, his mind already working. "At the diner downtown. She works the night shift there and weekends at the grocery store. We live in the apartments behind the strip mall." Vincent knew the place, a rundown complex that had been condemned twice but somehow stayed open. He pulled out his wallet and handed Oliver $200. "This is from Trevor," Vincent lied. "He would have wanted you to have it." Oliver stared at the money with wide eyes. "I can't take this, Mr. Caldwell. It's too much." "Yes, you can. And Oliver, if you ever need anything at all, you call me." Vincent handed the boy his business card. "Trevor wouldn't want you struggling alone." As Oliver walked away, clutching the money, Vincent felt something he hadn't experienced since Trevor's death: purpose. This boy represented everything good about his son, everything Diana was trying to destroy with her greed and betrayal. Vincent's phone buzzed with a text from Alex. "Got what you need on Morse. This guy's worse than you thought. Call me tonight." Another text came in from Marcus. "Diana moved out while you were gone. Took everything valuable she could carry." Harold called. "She's demanding immediate temporary support of $50,000 per month." Vincent read the messages and felt that familiar cold fury settling over him like armor. Diana thought she was being clever, striking while he was grieving and vulnerable. She had no idea that grief was just making him more dangerous. As he walked back to his car, Vincent's mind was already formulating a plan. Diana and Bradley had made one critical mistake. They assumed Vincent would play by conventional rules, that he would accept defeat gracefully like their previous victims. They were about to learn that Vincent Caldwell had never lost a war because he was willing to go further than his enemies ever imagined. The boy at the grave had reminded him what was at stake: not just money or pride, but honor itself. Trevor's legacy would not be tainted by his mother's greed. Vincent would make sure of that, no matter what it cost. Chapter 4. The Hunter Becomes the Hunted. Alex Caldwell sat across from Vincent in the back booth of Murphy's Tavern, a working-class bar where construction crews unwound after brutal days. At 43, Alex carried himself with the controlled violence of a man who had killed for his country and slept soundly afterward. The brothers shared the same steel-gray eyes and unforgiving nature, though Alex's military service had given him skills Vincent could only dream of. "Bradley Morse isn't just a guidance counselor," Alex began, sliding a thick manila folder across the table. "He's a goddamn predator with a system. 3 previous marriages destroyed, always the same pattern. He identifies wealthy, lonely wives, spends months building emotional connections, then moves in for the kill during family crises. Vincent opened the folder, his jaw tightening as he studied surveillance photos of Bradley meeting with Diana at various hotels and restaurants over the past 6 months. The bastard started grooming her right after Trevor announced his MIT acceptance, Vincent muttered. He knew exactly how much money was in that college fund. Gets worse, Alex continued. His ex-wife, Karen Morse, contacted me after I started asking questions. Apparently, Bradley has a gambling problem and owes serious money to some very unpleasant people in Atlantic City. We're talking $250,000 in debt to loan sharks. Vincent looked up sharply. How serious? The kind that break legs first and ask questions later. Bradley's desperate, which explains why he's moving so fast on Diana. He needs that divorce settlement to save his own life. The revelation changed everything. Vincent had assumed this was simple greed, but desperation made people dangerous and unpredictable. Bradley wasn't just stealing from Vincent. He was using Diana as a lifeline to escape his own destruction. There's more, Alex said, pulling out his phone. I had my tech specialist hack Bradley's communications. Want to hear what your loving wife really thinks of you? Alex played an audio recording of a phone conversation between Diana and Bradley from 2 days ago. The funeral was perfect. Diana's voice was cold and calculated. Vincent looked completely broken. This is the perfect time to strike. What about the college fund? Bradley's voice was nervous, desperate. He'll cave eventually. Vincent's always been weak when it comes to emotional manipulation. Once the divorce is final, we'll disappear to somewhere without extradition treaties. I've already been moving money offshore. And if he fights back, what's he going to do? He's just a construction worker who got lucky. I've been documenting his abusive behavior for months. By the time I'm done, he'll be lucky to keep 20% of his assets. Vincent's hands clenched so tightly around his whiskey glass that Alex worried it might shatter. The mask of grief Diana had worn at Trevor's funeral, the tears she had shed, all of it had been an act while she planned to rob their dead son's future. I'm going to destroy them both, Vincent said quietly. Good, Alex replied. Because I've already started. Remember Tommy Torino from high school? The kid who went into the family business. Vincent nodded. Tommy Torino now ran most of the illegal gambling operations in a 3-state area, including the ones Bradley owed money to. Tommy owes you a favor for that construction contract that kept his legitimate businesses afloat during the recession, Alex continued. I called him this morning. Bradley's debt just got sold to some very patient collectors, ones who understand the value of perfect timing. Vincent smiled for the first time since Trevor's death, but it was the predatory grin of a shark smelling blood. What's the plan? Vincent asked. Alex leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. We give Diana exactly what she wants, a weak, broken husband who's ready to surrender. Meanwhile, we build a case that will destroy her so completely she'll wish she had never been born. And Bradley's going to discover that some debts can never be repaid. Vincent nodded slowly. 20 years of marriage had taught Diana his business tactics, his straightforward approach to problem solving. She expected him to hire lawyers and fight in court, to play by rules that favored the sympathetic widow over the cold businessman. She had no idea that his brother had spent 15 years learning how to destroy enemies who thought they were safe. One more thing, Alex said, sliding a photograph across the table. I had someone watching Diana's new apartment. Guess who's been staying there every night? The photo showed Bradley leaving Diana's building at dawn, carrying an overnight bag. Vincent studied his wife's betrayer, a soft, pampered man who had never faced real hardship, never built anything with his own hands. He looked scared, Vincent observed. He should be. Words already spreading through certain circles that Bradley Morse is under new management. His loan shark friends are very interested in meeting the man who bought their debt. Vincent finished his whiskey and stood up. How long do we have? Diana's lawyer filed for expedited proceedings. They want a hearing next week to establish temporary support and asset division. They're hoping to pressure you into a quick settlement. Perfect, Vincent said. Let them think they're winning. Meanwhile, I want everything, bank records, communications, travel history, everything. If Diana's been moving money offshore, I want to know where every penny went. As the brothers left the bar, Vincent felt something he hadn't experienced in days: anticipation. Diana and Bradley had played their hand too early, revealing their desperation and greed. Now Vincent would show them what happened when someone tried to steal from a man who had nothing left to lose. The hunt was on, and Vincent Caldwell had never lost a hunt in his life. Chapter 5. The Trap is Set. Vincent sat in Harold Grimsby's office, playing the role of a broken man perfectly. He had let his usually immaculate appearance slip: unshaven, wrinkled clothes, the look of someone consumed by grief and defeat. Across the conference table, Diana's lawyer, Patricia Kellerman, watched him with barely concealed satisfaction. "Mr. Caldwell," Patricia began, her voice dripping with false sympathy, "I understand this is difficult, but we need to discuss the immediate financial arrangements. Mrs. Caldwell requires $50,000 monthly support while the divorce proceedings continue." Vincent looked up with red-rimmed eyes, the picture of devastation. "50,000? I don't know if the business can support that right now." Diana, sitting beside her lawyer in a perfectly tailored black dress, leaned forward with mock concern. "Vincent, darling, I know this is hard, but I did sacrifice my career for 20 years to support your ambitions. Surely that's worth something." The performance was masterful. Anyone watching would see a grieving widow trying to secure her future while her emotionally destroyed husband struggled to process the loss of his son and marriage simultaneously. "The business has been struggling," Vincent lied smoothly. "Trevor's medical bills, the funeral costs. I'm not sure we can maintain current operations much longer." Harold Grimsby, who knew the truth about Vincent's financial situation, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Caldwell Construction was worth over $50 million and had 3 major contracts lined up for the next year. "Perhaps we could arrange for a financial audit," Patricia suggested, "just to establish a clear picture of assets." "Of course," Vincent replied, his voice hollow. "I just want this to be over with. I can't handle much more." After the meeting, Vincent drove to a small coffee shop 20 miles outside town where Alex was waiting. His brother was studying aerial photographs of Diana's new apartment building when Vincent slid into the opposite booth. "How'd it go?" Alex asked. "They bought it completely. Diana thinks she's got me on the ropes." Vincent's demeanor had shifted instantly from broken husband to calculating predator. "They're pushing for a quick settlement." "Good, because I've got some interesting news about your wife's financial activities." Alex spread several documents across the table. "Diana's been busy. She opened 3 separate accounts in the Cayman Islands over the past year, all under shell corporations." Vincent studied the bank statements Alex had somehow acquired. $2.8 million? Where the hell did she get that kind of money? "From you, brother. She's been skimming from the household accounts, selling jewelry and art pieces, even took a secret loan against the house. Diana's been planning this divorce for over a year." The revelation hit Vincent like a physical blow. While he had been working 18-hour days to build their fortune, while Trevor had been getting ready for college, Diana had been systematically stealing from their family to fund her escape plan. "There's more," Alex continued. "Remember that girl's trip to Europe she took last spring? She wasn't sightseeing. She was setting up residency paperwork in Switzerland, non-extradition country with very favorable laws for wealthy divorcees." Vincent's hands clenched into fists. Diana hadn't just betrayed their marriage. She had been planning to disappear entirely, leaving him with nothing but legal bills and heartbreak. "What about Bradley?" Alex smiled grimly. "Bradley's having a very bad week. His gambling debts got called in early, his car was repossessed, and his apartment building is suddenly enforcing lease violations he didn't know existed. He's been staying at Diana's place full-time now. You've been busy. Tommy Torino's people are very thorough. Bradley's starting to understand that his problems won't disappear with a divorce settlement. In fact, his problems are just beginning." Vincent leaned back in his booth, his mind racing. Diana and Bradley thought they were manipulating a grieving, broken man into surrendering his fortune. Instead, they were walking into a trap that would destroy them both. "I want to visit Oliver Reed tomorrow," Vincent said suddenly. Alex looked surprised. The kid from the cemetery? Trevor's legacy isn't going to be his mother's greed. I'm setting up a scholarship fund in his name, and Oliver's going to be the first recipient. That's surprisingly sentimental for you. Vincent's eyes hardened. It's not sentiment. It's justice. Diana wants to steal money that was meant for education? Fine. I'll make sure it goes to kids who actually deserve it. Kids like Oliver who understand what it means to work for something. Alex nodded approvingly. What about the divorce hearing next week? I'm going to give them exactly what they want. A complete victory. Temporary custody of assets, control of the business, everything. Let them think they've won. And then, Vincent smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then I'm going to show them what happens when you try to steal from Caldwell. Diana want to play games with our dead son's money? I'm going to make her pay for every penny she's stolen. And Bradley's going to wish he had never heard our family name. As the brothers left the coffee shop, Vincent felt the familiar cold focus settling over him. This was what he did best: identify a target, plan their destruction, then execute with ruthless precision. Diana and Bradley had made one fatal mistake. They had assumed Vincent's grief made him weak. They were about to learn that grief had only made him more dangerous. Chapter 6: The Perfect Victim. The divorce hearing was a masterpiece of legal theater. Vincent sat slumped in his chair, occasionally wiping his eyes with a handkerchief, while Diana's lawyer painted him as an emotionally abusive workaholic who had driven his wife to desperation. Diana herself delivered a performance worthy of an Academy Award, describing 20 years of loneliness and neglect while Vincent built his business empire. Judge Morrison, a stern woman in her 60s, listened with increasing sympathy as Diana described her sacrifice of career ambitions to support her husband's relentless pursuit of wealth. Your Honor, Patricia Kellerman concluded, Mrs. Caldwell has been forced to start over at 52 years old, with no career prospects and no financial security. The requested support is not only reasonable, it's necessary for her survival. Vincent's lawyer, a deliberately incompetent attorney Alex had recommended, fumbled through a weak defense focused on business difficulties and emotional distress. Harold Grimsby watched from the gallery, visibly uncomfortable with the deception but bound by attorney-client privilege. Mr. Caldwell, Judge Morrison addressed Vincent directly. Do you contest your wife's request for temporary support? Vincent looked up with hollow eyes, the picture of a broken man. No, Your Honor. I just want Diana to be taken care of. She's been through enough. Diana squeezed her lawyer's arm, struggling to contain her satisfaction. The performance was working perfectly. Very well, Judge Morrison ruled. I'm granting the petitioner's request for monthly support of $50,000 to be paid from the marital assets. Additionally, Mrs. Caldwell is granted temporary residence in the family home while asset division is determined. Vincent's shoulders sagged as if the world had just collapsed around him. In the gallery, several observers, all carefully placed by Alex, murmured sympathetically about the poor man's obvious devastation. After the hearing, Vincent met Diana in the courthouse hallway. She approached him with mock concern, her hand briefly touching his arm. Vincent, I know this is difficult, she said, her voice perfectly modulated for the watching reporters Alex had tipped off. But this is for the best. We both need to move on. I know, Vincent replied, his voice barely above a whisper. I never thought it would end like this. Trevor wouldn't want us to destroy each other, Diana continued, her tone suggesting maternal wisdom rather than calculated manipulation. Vincent nodded numbly, then walked away like a man carrying the weight of the world. Behind him, Diana smiled triumphantly at her lawyer. 3 hours later, Vincent was sitting in Oliver Reed's living room, which was little more than a cramped apartment with peeling wallpaper and secondhand furniture. Oliver's mother, Marie, was a thin woman with tired eyes who looked older than her 34 years. Mr. Caldwell, I don't understand, Marie said, staring at the check Vincent had just handed her. $25,000? This is too much. It's not too much, Vincent replied. It's exactly what Trevor would have wanted. This is the beginning of a scholarship fund in his name, and Oliver is our first recipient. Oliver, who had been silently listening from the kitchen table where his homework was spread out, looked up with those bright blue eyes that reminded Vincent so painfully of his son. "Mr. Caldwell, I promise I'll work really hard," the boy said solemnly. "I won't waste Trevor's gift." Vincent felt something crack in his chest. This was what real gratitude looked like. Not Diana's calculated greed or Bradley's desperate manipulation, but genuine appreciation from a child who understood the value of opportunity. "There's more," Vincent continued, pulling out additional documents. "I'm establishing a trust fund that will cover Oliver's education through college, and I'm offering you a position with my company, Marie. Administrative work, full benefits, starting at $60,000 a year." Marie burst into tears, covering her face with her hands. "I don't. Why are you doing this for us?" "Because Trevor saw something special in Oliver," Vincent lied smoothly. The truth was more complex. Oliver represented everything Diana was trying to destroy, everything good about family and loyalty and earned success. As Vincent left the Reed apartment, his phone buzzed with a message from Alex. "Diana and Bradley celebrated at the Ritz tonight. Charged $800 dinner to your credit card. They're not even trying to hide it anymore." Vincent smiled grimly. Diana's arrogance was perfect. Every public display of her victory, every expensive meal charged to his accounts, every interview with sympathetic reporters was building a narrative that would ultimately destroy her. His phone rang, and Harold Grimsby's nervous voice filled the car. "Vincent, I have to ask, what exactly are you planning? Diana's lawyer is already talking about the final settlement hearing. They want everything resolved within 30 days. "Perfect," Vincent replied. "Tell them I'll agree to whatever they want. Full asset division, minimal alimony resistance, the works. I just want this nightmare to end." "But Vincent, that would cost you." "I know exactly what it will cost me. Harold, just play your part." After hanging up, Vincent drove to the cemetery where Trevor lay. The temporary headstone had been replaced with a beautiful granite marker that read, "Trevor Michael Caldwell, beloved son, his legacy lives on." Vincent knelt beside the grave, speaking quietly to the darkness. "They think they've won, son. Diana's already spending money she hasn't earned yet, and Bradley thinks he's found his meal ticket. But they don't understand. This was never about the money. This is about making sure your memory isn't tainted by their greed." A cool wind rustled through the trees, and Vincent stood, his resolve hardening like steel. The trap was set, the bait had been taken, and now all that remained was the spring. Diana and Bradley had 30 days to enjoy their victory. It would be the last 30 days of happiness they would ever know. Chapter 7. The Reckoning Begins. Diana Caldwell stood in the kitchen of her family's estate, now legally hers by temporary court order, directing the removal of Vincent's personal belongings. Professional movers boxed up 20 years of his life, while she sipped champagne and planned her future with Bradley. The man himself lounged by the pool, already comfortable in his new role as the lady of the manor's companion. "Careful with that," Diana instructed as movers handled Vincent's awards and business certificates. "Those might be worth something at auction." Her phone buzzed with a call from Patricia Kellerman, her lawyer, who was practically giddy with their success. "Diana, I have wonderful news. Vincent's agreed to the final settlement terms. He's not even requesting a business valuation hearing. Frankly, I've never seen such a complete capitulation." Diana smiled triumphantly. He always was weak underneath all that bluster. "What's the timeline?" "Final hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Bring your passport. Once this is signed, you'll want to travel quickly to avoid any complications." After hanging up, Diana joined Bradley by the pool. He was reading financial documents, his face pale with stress despite their apparent victory. "What's wrong with you?" Diana asked, settling into the lounge chair beside him. "We've won everything." Bradley looked up with haunted eyes. "Something doesn't feel right, Diana. Vincent's giving up too easily. In my experience, men like him don't surrender without a fight. Men like him." Diana laughed. "Bradley, you're a guidance counselor from a small town. Vincent's just a construction worker who got lucky. Neither of you understands real power." Bradley's phone rang, interrupting their conversation. His face went white as he listened to the voice on the other end. "Who was that?" Diana asked when he hung up. My creditors. They want to meet tonight. Something about new payment terms. Diana waved dismissively. After tomorrow, you'll have enough money to pay off all your debts and still live like a king. Stop worrying. What Diana didn't know was that Vincent was at that moment sitting in his new apartment across town, watching live surveillance feeds from cameras Alex had installed throughout the estate. Every conversation, every smug comment, every display of arrogance was being recorded for posterity. "They're pathetic," Alex commented, watching Bradley pace nervously by the pool. He knows something's wrong, but can't figure out what. Vincent's attention was focused on Diana's casual cruelty as she discussed selling Trevor's belongings. Her complete lack of remorse, her eagerness to profit from their dead son's memory, confirmed everything he needed to know about her character. "Time for phase 2, Vincent said quietly. Alex made a phone call, speaking in code to someone on the other end. Within minutes, Vincent's phone buzzed with a message, "Package delivered." Across town, Bradley's phone rang again. This time, the voice belonged to Tommy Torino himself. "Mr. Morse, this is Tommy. I think we need to have a face-to-face conversation about your situation. Tonight, 10 p.m., Warehouse District. Come alone." Bradley's hand shook as he ended the call. He had heard stories about Tommy Torino, whispered warnings about men who borrowed money from the wrong people, disappeared permanently. "I have to go out," Bradley told Diana, his voice barely steady. "Where?" "Business meeting. About the debts. I'll be back later." Diana barely looked up for her magazine. "Whatever. Just don't do anything to jeopardize tomorrow's hearing." As Bradley drove toward what he assumed would be his death, Vincent was implementing the next phase of his plan. At exactly 9 p.m., while Diana was soaking in a bubble bath and planning her new life, every major news outlet in the state received an anonymous package. The package contained detailed financial records showing Diana's systematic theft from family accounts, her secret overseas banking arrangements, and recorded conversations between her and Bradley discussing their plan to destroy Vincent emotionally and financially. But the most damaging evidence was a recording from just hours after Trevor's funeral, where Diana laughed about how perfectly timed her son's death had been for her divorce plans. By 10 p.m., the story was breaking on every local news channel. "Wealthy widow's shocking betrayal" dominated the headlines, with audio clips of Diana's coldest comments playing on repeat. Diana's phone started ringing incessantly as reporters demanded comments. But she was still in her bath, blissfully unaware that her carefully constructed victim narrative was crumbling in real time. Meanwhile, at the warehouse meeting, Bradley discovered that Tommy Torino was surprisingly reasonable. "Relax, kid," Tommy said, lighting a cigarette in the abandoned building. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to make you an offer." "An offer?" "Your debt's been bought by someone who has very specific plans for you. Tomorrow morning, you're going to do exactly what he tells you when he tells you. In exchange, your debt disappears completely." Bradley's relief was overwhelming. What do I have to do?" Tommy smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You're going to tell the truth, Bradley. Every detail about your relationship with Diana Caldwell, every plan you made together, every lie you helped her construct. You're going to destroy her so completely that she'll never recover. But the divorce settlement. There won't be a divorce settlement. By tomorrow afternoon, Diana Caldwell will be facing federal fraud charges and possible extradition to answer for her overseas financial crimes." Bradley stared in horror as the reality of his situation became clear. He had been played by an expert, manipulated into betraying Diana by someone who understood exactly how to exploit his weaknesses. "Who bought my debt?" Bradley whispered. Tommy's smile widened. "Someone Diana should never have tried to steal from. Someone who doesn't forgive, doesn't forget, and never loses." As Bradley drove home in a daze, Vincent watched the news coverage with grim satisfaction. Diana's public image was in flames. Bradley was now his unwilling ally, and tomorrow's hearing would be remembered as one of the most spectacular courtroom reversals in local history. The reckoning had begun, and Diana Caldwell had no idea what was about to hit her. Chapter 8: The Courtroom Massacre. Diana Caldwell arrived at the courthouse the next morning in a designer suit, her confidence unshaken despite a sleepless night fielding angry calls from reporters. She had dismissed the news coverage as sensationalized gossip and instructed Patricia Kellerman to proceed with the settlement hearing as planned. The media will move on to the next story by next week, Diana told her lawyer as they walked through a gauntlet of cameras and shouting journalists. Vincent's probably behind this somehow, trying to make me look bad. It won't work. Patricia looked less confident. Diana, we should consider postponing. The recordings they're playing are taken out of context, Diana interrupted. Grief makes people say things they don't mean. Any jury will understand that. What Diana didn't see was Bradley Morse sitting in his car across the street, his hands shaking as he stared at the courthouse entrance. His phone had been buzzing all morning with instructions from Tommy Torino's people, detailed directions about exactly what he would say and when. Vincent entered through a side entrance, still playing the role of a broken man, but now accompanied by a new legal team, 3 high-powered attorneys from the state capitol who specialized in complex fraud cases. The change in representation was the first sign that something had shifted. Judge Morrison called the hearing to order, expecting a routine settlement approval. Instead, she found herself presiding over a legal earthquake. Your Honor, Vincent's lead attorney, Catherine Hayes, stood immediately. We request a postponement of these proceedings pending a criminal investigation into fraudulent concealment of assets. Patricia Kellerman shot to her feet. Objection. This is clearly a desperate attempt to delay. Your Honor, Catherine continued calmly. We have evidence that Mrs. Caldwell has systematically embezzled over $2.8 million from marital assets, hidden funds and offshore accounts, and engaged in conspiracy to defraud through false statements to this court. Judge Morrison's expression darkened. These are serious allegations. Counselor, do you have proof? Catherine smiled. We do, Your Honor. We call our first witness, Bradley Morse. Diana's head snapped around as Bradley entered the courtroom, his face pale but determined. He had made his choice between prison and betrayal, and survival had won. Mr. Morse, Catherine began, please describe your relationship with the defendant. Bradley's voice was barely above a whisper at first, but it grew stronger as he spoke. Diana Caldwell and I have been having an affair for 8 months. We planned to divorce her husband and split the settlement money. Diana started to stand, but Patricia pulled her back down. The courtroom erupted in murmurs as reporters scribbled frantically. Did Mrs. Caldwell ever discuss her financial arrangements during your relationship? Yes. She showed me bank statements from accounts in the Cayman Islands. She said she had been moving money there for over a year, preparing for the divorce. And did she ever express feelings about her son's death? Bradley hesitated, then delivered the killing blow. She said Trevor's death was perfect timing for the divorce, that Vincent would be too emotionally destroyed to fight for his assets. The courtroom fell silent, except for the sound of Diana's sharp intake of breath. Even Patricia Kellerman looked stunned by the revelation. Catherine introduced evidence methodically. Bank records, recorded conversations, travel documents showing Diana's trips to establish foreign residency. Each piece of evidence was another nail in Diana's coffin. Your Honor, Catherine concluded, Mrs. Caldwell is not a grieving widow seeking reasonable support. She is a calculating criminal who used her son's death as cover for the largest theft in this county's history. Judge Morrison's voice was ice-cold when she spoke. Mrs. Caldwell, I am immediately freezing all marital assets pending a criminal investigation. You are ordered to surrender your passport and remain within the state. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the district attorney for possible prosecution. Diana finally found her voice, standing and screaming. This is insane. Vincent orchestrated all of this. He's framing me. Sit down, Mrs. Caldwell. Judge Morrison snapped, or I'll have you removed from my courtroom. As Diana collapsed back in her chair, Vincent finally allowed himself to look directly at her. The woman who had called him weak, who had planned to steal their dead son's future, now sat exposed and humiliated before a room full of witnesses. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Vincent as he emerged with his legal team. For the first time in weeks, he stood tall and confident, the broken man persona completely abandoned. Mr. Caldwell, how does it feel to have your wife's deception exposed? Vincent looked directly into the cameras, his voice carrying the authority that had built an empire. My son Trevor believed in justice and integrity. Today, justice was served. No one, and I mean no one, steals from the memory of my boy and gets away with it. What's next for you? I'm establishing the Trevor Caldwell Scholarship Foundation to help deserving students like my son achieve their dreams. Diana wanted to steal money meant for education. I'm making sure it goes to kids who will honor Trevor's legacy. As Vincent walked away, Diana was being led from the courthouse in handcuffs, charged with fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Her designer suit couldn't hide the fact that she was just another criminal who had underestimated her victim. Bradley Morse disappeared that afternoon, relocating to a different state under an assumed identity provided by Tommy Torino's organization. His debt was forgiven, but he would spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, knowing that Vincent Caldwell had the power to find him anywhere. The war was over, and Vincent had won so completely that his enemies would never recover. But there was one final act still to come. Chapter 9, Legacy of Steel. 6 months later, Vincent stood in the gleaming conference room of the Trevor Caldwell Foundation, watching as Oliver Reed signed his scholarship agreement. The boy had grown taller, more confident, his bright future now secured by the very money Diana had tried to steal. "Thank you, Mr. Caldwell," Oliver said solemnly. "I promise I'll make Trevor proud." "You already have," Vincent replied, meaning every word. Marie Reed, now working as the Foundation's administrative director, beamed with pride as she watched her son secure his future. Vincent had given them more than money. He had given them hope and purpose. Diana Caldwell sat in a federal prison, serving a 12-year sentence for fraud and money laundering. Her legal bills had consumed what little legitimate assets she had left, and her name had become synonymous with betrayal and greed. She would be 64 when she was released, with no money, no reputation, and no future. Bradley Morse had lasted 3 months in his new life before his gambling addiction resurfaced. He currently worked as a night janitor in a factory under constant surveillance by people who ensured he never tried to contact anyone from his past. His teaching credentials had been permanently revoked, his pension forfeited. Vincent's construction empire had not only survived the scandal but thrived. The publicity had brought in new contracts from clients who respected his integrity and ruthlessness in equal measure. Caldwell Construction was now worth over $70 million and employed 300 people. Alex Caldwell joined Vincent in the Foundation's main office, where a bronze statue of Trevor dominated the entrance. The 17-year-old's face was captured in bronze, smiling with the confidence of someone who believed the future held infinite possibilities. "Any regrets?" Alex asked his brother. Vincent considered the question carefully. "About Diana and Bradley?" "None. They chose their path when they decided to steal from Trevor's memory. I just made sure they faced the consequences." "What about the methods we used?" Vincent's smile was cold as winter steel. "I built my fortune by being willing to do what others wouldn't." Diana wanted to play games with a Caldwell. She learned what that actually means. The Foundation's first annual scholarship ceremony was held that evening in the ballroom of the city's finest hotel. 50 deserving students received awards ranging from $5,000 to full college funding, each one selected based on merit and need rather than politics or connections. Oliver Reed, as the Foundation's first recipient, gave a speech that brought tears to many eyes. He spoke about second chances, about the kindness of strangers, and about honoring the memory of someone he had barely known but who had changed his life completely. Vincent watched from the head table, surrounded by community leaders and business partners who now saw him as both a philanthropist and someone never to be crossed. The duality suited him perfectly. After the ceremony, Vincent drove alone to Hillcrest Cemetery. Trevor's grave was surrounded by fresh flowers from scholarship recipients and their families, a reminder that good could emerge from even the darkest betrayals. "I kept my promise, son," Vincent said quietly. "Your money is helping kids who deserve it, not the woman who tried to steal your future." Diana's in prison where she belongs, and Bradley learned what happens to people who cross our family. A cool breeze rustled through the trees, and Vincent felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced since Trevor's death. Justice had been served, completely and without mercy. His phone buzzed with a text from Marie Reed. Oliver got his first college acceptance letter today. MIT, just like Trevor. Thank you for everything. Vincent smiled, understanding that Trevor's legacy would live on through the students they helped, through the opportunities they created, through the lives they changed. Diana had tried to destroy that legacy for money, but instead she had only made it stronger. As Vincent walked back to his car, he passed another grave, that of the drunk driver who had killed his son. The man had died in prison 6 months ago, victim of what the guards called an unfortunate accident involving a fall downstairs. Vincent hadn't ordered that death, but he hadn't mourned it either. Some debts could only be paid in blood, and the man who had destroyed Trevor's future had finally paid his. The Caldwell name now meant something different in their community. It represented justice and philanthropy, but also warned that crossing the family came with a price too terrible to imagine. Vincent drove home to his new house, smaller than the estate, but perfect for a man starting over. On his desk was a letter from Oliver Reed, describing his excitement about college and his determination to study engineering like his hero Trevor. For the first time since his son's death, Vincent felt genuinely happy. Diana had wanted to steal Trevor's future and use it to fund her escape. Instead, she had ensured that Trevor's memory would inspire dozens of young people to achieve greatness. The irony was perfect, and Vincent savored it like fine wine. Diana Caldwell had learned the most important lesson of her life. Never try to steal from a man who has nothing left to lose and everything to avenge. Vincent Caldwell had taught her that lesson with the thoroughness of a master and the mercy of a glacier. The war was over, and the righteous had prevailed. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. A warm welcome to Infidelity Tales Lab. Thank you for supporting our channel. Quick question before we start. Where are you tuning in from today? East Coast? West Coast? Another continent entirely? Let us know. Now let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Foundation Cracks. Dominic Reeves surveyed the sprawling Tudor-style home from his driveway, admiring the craftsmanship of the stone facade he'd meticulously restored over weekends spanning 3 summers. At 42, he'd built everything in his life through calculated persistence. His contracting business, his investment portfolio, and this house that represented 15 years of marriage to Vanessa. The November wind carried the scent of coming snow as Dom stepped inside, dropping his work boots in the mudroom. The house was quiet, too quiet for 6 p.m. on a Thursday when Vanessa usually had dinner preparations underway. Her silver Audi sat in the driveway, so she was home. "Ness," he called, making his way through the kitchen. He found her in the study, phone pressed to her ear, her voice dropping to a whisper when she spotted him. Her honey blonde hair was freshly styled, a new cut he hadn't seen before, and she wore an outfit too formal for a day at home. "I'll call you back," she said into the phone, ending the call abruptly. "Hey, you're early." Dom leaned against the doorframe. Meeting finished ahead of schedule. The Wesper project is finally cleared for permits. He paused, studying her. "You look nice. Going somewhere. Just met with Marianne for lunch." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "She's thinking about selling her condo." Dominic nodded, though he knew his sister-in-law had just renovated that condo less than 6 months ago. Something felt off, as it had for months now. Vanessa's unexplained absences, her dwindling interest in their renovation plans, the way she guarded her phone. "I was thinking we could finally discuss the kitchen remodel," he suggested. "Contractor discount on the cabinets expires next week." Vanessa busied herself organizing papers on the desk. "Let's put that on hold. The market's been so unpredictable lately." "We've been putting it on hold for almost a year," Dom replied, keeping his voice even. "It was your idea in the first place." Things changed, Dom. She stood, slipping past him. I need to grab something from the drugstore. Don't wait up for dinner. Before he could respond, she was gone, the front door closing with decisive finality. Dom stood in the empty study, noting the browser tab open on her laptop, a real estate valuation website showing comparable homes in their neighborhood. Over the next 3 weeks, Dom observed the subtle shifts in their household with mounting unease. Vanessa began boxing personal items, claiming to declutter. She made appointments that required privacy. The safe in his home office had been accessed, the document folder containing their property deed slightly askew. On a frigid December evening, Dominic returned from a job site to find Vanessa waiting in the living room, perched on the edge of the sofa like a visitor in her own home. "We need to talk about the house," she announced without preamble. "What about it?" Dom asked, remaining standing. "I've been thinking we should sell. The market's hot right now. Homes in this neighborhood are going for 20% above asking." She spoke with practiced casualness. "It's the perfect time to cash out and maybe downsize." Dom studied his wife of 15 years, seeing the stranger she'd become. "This is sudden. We put a lot into this place. That's exactly why we should sell, maximize our investment." She slid a business card across the coffee table. "I've already spoken with a realtor. He's my cousin from my mother's side, Troy Lowell. You've never met him, but he specializes in luxury properties." Dom picked up the card, examining the glossy stock and professional logo of Pinnacle Realty. The man pictured had a square jaw and confident smile, handsome in a conventional way that immediately put Dom on alert. "Your cousin," he repeated, his contractor's mind calculating the improbability. "Your mother was an only child." Vanessa's smile faltered slightly. "Second cousin, technically, through my grandmother's sister's side." Dom nodded, pocketing the card. "I'd like to meet him before we make any decisions." "Of course," she agreed too quickly. "He's coming by tomorrow afternoon for an initial consultation. I told him you'd have questions." That night, Dom lay awake listening to Vanessa's measured breathing beside him, contemplating the sudden urgency to sell the home they'd planned to grow old in. Outside their bedroom window, snow began to fall, covering the garden where they'd buried their dog River 3 years ago, the garden where Vanessa had once talked about building a greenhouse for her retirement hobby. Dom slipped from bed and made his way to his home office, where he carefully photographed every document in their safe, forwarded emails from Vanessa's open laptop to his secure account, and made a crucial phone call to Walter Graves, an attorney who had represented his contracting business for years. "Walt, it's Dom Reeves. I know it's late, but I need your help with something delicate. I think I'm about to be blindsided." Chapter 2. The Interloper. Troy Lowell arrived precisely at 3 the following afternoon, wearing a tailored charcoal suit that screamed success and bearing a leather portfolio embossed with the Pinnacle Realty logo. Dom observed the easy familiarity between Troy and Vanessa, the almost imperceptible touch of hands as Troy passed her a coffee, the shared glances that communicated more than casual acquaintance. "Dominic," Troy extended his hand with practiced charm. "Pleasure to finally meet you. Vanessa speaks highly of your craftsmanship." Dom shook the offered hand firmly, noting the expensive watch and manicured nails. "Interesting. She's never mentioned you until yesterday." Troy's smile didn't waver. "Family reunions are too infrequent these days. I've been based in Phoenix until recently." He opened his portfolio, revealing glossy market analyses. "I've taken the liberty of preparing some preliminary numbers. The improvements you've made to this property put it in an exceptional bracket." For the next hour, Dom listened as Troy presented his pitch, market trends, comparables, staging recommendations. He spoke with the confidence of someone who had already secured the listing. "I notice you've increased the value estimation by nearly 30% over the county assessment," Dom observed, pointing to a figure on one of Troy's spreadsheets. "Conservative, actually," Troy replied smoothly. "I've already had interest from several clients looking in this area. One in particular who would likely make an offer without the property even hitting the market." "How convenient," Dom remarked. "Isn't it?" Vanessa interjected. "Troy says we could close before February if we move quickly." Dom leaned back, feigning consideration. "I'd like to see some documentation on those comparable sales." And your client list. Troy's confidence faltered momentarily. Client confidentiality prevents me from sharing specific names, but I can provide anonymized transaction histories. Necessary due diligence, Dom replied with a businessman's smile. I'm sure you understand. After Troy departed with promises of additional documentation, Vanessa confronted Dom in the kitchen. You were unnecessarily combative, she accused, arms crossed defensively. Dom rinsed his coffee mug methodically. Just doing my homework on someone who appeared out of nowhere to sell our biggest asset. He's family, Dom. Is he? Dom turned, leaning against the counter. Because I spent an hour with him and didn't see any family resemblance. Not in looks, not in mannerisms. Don't be ridiculous. When did you reconnect with his cousin? Exactly? Vanessa's gaze shifted away. A few months ago, at a real estate seminar. Interesting networking opportunity for family members who haven't seen each other in years. The tension between them stretched taut as a wire. Finally, Vanessa sighed dramatically. I need this change, Dom. The house, this life, it's suffocating me. The house, Dom repeated quietly. Or our marriage? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Over the next 2 weeks, Dom presented the perfect image of a reluctant but cooperative husband. He attended meetings with Troy, reviewed paperwork, and asked just enough questions to appear engaged without being obstructive. Meanwhile, he worked quietly behind the scenes. Lena Winters, a private investigator recommended by his attorney, provided daily updates on Vanessa and Troy's activities. Lunch meetings at secluded restaurants, afternoon visits to a luxury apartment building downtown, lengthy phone calls made from parking garages. Dom reviewed each report impassively, building his case with methodical precision. Through casual conversations with neighbors and business associates, Dom pieced together Troy Lowell's hastily constructed background. He hadn't moved from Phoenix. He'd relocated from Boston following a series of complaints filed with the Massachusetts Real Estate Commission. He specialized in high-value properties where emotions and relationships were strained, swooping in like a vulture when marriages fractured. One evening, Dom's neighbor Hank Dobson stopped by with a bottle of scotch and concerning information. Thought you should know, Hank said, lowering his voice although they were alone in Dom's garage workshop. I saw Vanessa and that realtor fellow at the Lakeside Motel last Wednesday. They were, not discussing square footage, if you catch my meaning. Dom nodded, unsurprised. I appreciate the heads up, Hank. You two having problems? Martha, and I always thought you were rock solid. Dom carefully measured a piece of walnut he was shaping into what appeared to be a small box. Every foundation has weak points. You just don't notice them until pressure is applied. 2 days later, Vanessa announced that Troy had secured a buyer willing to pay 15% above their already inflated asking price, contingent on a quick private sale. It's perfect timing, she gushed, seeming almost manic with excitement. The buyer wants minimal inspections and is willing to close within 3 weeks. Dom carefully folded the newspaper he'd been reading. Sounds too good to be true. It's a cash offer, Dom. We'd clear nearly double what we paid. And this mystery buyer, they've seen the property? Vanessa hesitated. Troy showed them comparable listings. They trust his judgment. Dom nodded thoughtfully. I'll need my attorney to review everything before signing. Why involve attorneys? Vanessa's voice rose slightly. Troy says his in-house legal team can handle everything. I'm sure they can, Dom replied evenly. But indulge me in this small precaution. After all, we're talking about our largest asset. Vanessa reluctantly agreed, though Dom noted the immediate phone call she made from the privacy of their bedroom afterward. He could almost envision Troy's frustration at this minor complication in their plan. What neither of them realized was that Walter Graves had already been investigating Troy Lowell's real estate practices for weeks, building a comprehensive file that would prove instrumental in what was to come. Chapter 3: The Betrayal. January brought bitter winds and Vanessa's growing impatience. The closing date approached, and Dom maintained his facade of grudging cooperation while systematically documenting every irregularity in the transaction. He noted how Troy circumvented standard procedures, how inspection requirements were mysteriously waived, how the purchase agreement contained unusual clauses buried in legal jargon. The morning of the closing, Dom dressed methodically in his best suit, charcoal gray with a deep blue tie that Vanessa had given him on their 10th anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on him as he slipped his grandfather's pocket watch into his vest pocket, along with a small digital recording device. "Ready?" Vanessa asked, appearing in the doorway. She wore a cream-colored dress he'd never seen before, her wedding ring conspicuously absent. "Almost," he replied, placing a single document in his inner pocket. Big day. At the title company's office, Troy greeted them with professional enthusiasm that barely masked his triumph. The conference room held only the essential participants, the title agent, a notary, and Troy's paralegal. Walter Graves, Dom's attorney, had been unavoidably delayed, according to the apologetic text Dom received just before the meeting. "We should proceed," Troy suggested smoothly. "Mr. Graves can review the final documents afterward." Dom nodded agreeably. "I assume the buyer will be joining us?" Troy exchanged a quick glance with Vanessa. "Actually, she's on a conference call, but has pre-signed the necessary paperwork. All very standard in these situations." The title agent, a nervous young woman named Priscilla, distributed document packages. "Before we begin, I need to confirm that both sellers understand they're transferring property to..." She consulted her paperwork. "Lowell Holdings, LLC. Dom raised an eyebrow. "Interesting coincidence, the buyer sharing your surname." Troy cleared his throat. "Common name. No relation." Dom flipped through the documents with deliberate slowness, watching Vanessa's increasing agitation as he asked clarifying questions about each section. Finally, after nearly an hour of meticulous review, he reached the final signature page. "Just one question before we proceed," Dom said casually. "Who exactly is the principal of Lowell Holdings, LLC?" The title agent looked uncomfortable. According to the purchasing documents, that would be Mr. Troy Lowell. A heavy silence fell across the conference room. Vanessa's face remained carefully composed, but the slight tremor in her hand as she reached for her water glass betrayed her. Dom closed his document folder. "So my wife's cousin is also the buyer of our home." "Fascinating." Troy leaned forward with practiced concern. "I can explain the appearance of impropriety." "No need," Dom interrupted. "It's actually quite transparent." The title agent shifted uncomfortably. "Perhaps we should reschedule." "Let's continue," Vanessa insisted, her voice tight. "There's nothing illegal about a realtor purchasing property." "True," Dom agreed, "though it certainly raises ethical questions about fair market value and representation." Despite the tension, the closing proceeded. Dom signed where indicated, his signature flowing across the pages with surprising ease for a man being systematically betrayed. When they reached the final disbursement forms, Troy produced a cashier's check made out to Dominic Reeves for an amount significantly below half the sale price. "Your portion," Troy explained with barely concealed satisfaction, after adjusting for the outstanding home equity line and Vanessa's premarital contribution to the down payment. Dom examined the check. $127,500 for 15 years of mortgage payments, improvements, and life built within those walls. Without comment, he pocketed it and stood. "Congratulations on your new home," he said simply. Outside in the parking lot, Vanessa caught up to him, Troy hovering protectively nearby. "Don't make this difficult, Dom," she said, her voice a mixture of guilt and defiance. "We both know the marriage has been over for years. Take the check and disappear. Start fresh somewhere." Dom studied his wife's face, the woman who had once vowed to stand beside him through whatever life brought. 15 years reduced to a suggestion to disappear, he observed quietly. "It's more than fair," Troy interjected. "The house needed substantial work when you bought it." "Work I did with my own hands," Dom finished, "including the hidden safe room behind the wine cellar that's not on any floor plan." He smiled at Troy's momentary confusion. "Enjoy the house." As Dom walked to his truck, Vanessa called after him. "This is for the best, Dom." Clean break. He turned, facing them both one last time. "Nothing about betrayal is clean, Vanessa. Give my regards to your cousin." Dom drove directly to Walter Graves' office, where the attorney waited with Lena Winters and a court reporter. "It's done," Dom confirmed, placing his recording device on the conference table. They took the bait. Walter nodded grimly. Then we proceed with Phase 2. At precisely 8:30 the following morning, Walter's secretary placed a call to Vanessa Reeves' cell phone. Dom sat across from Walter's desk, watching the attorney's speakerphone as his wife's cautious greeting filled the room. "Mrs. Reeves, this is Walter Graves' office. Mr. Graves requests your immediate presence regarding irregularities discovered in yesterday's property transfer. Mr. Lowell should attend as well." There was a moment of silence before Vanessa responded, her voice noticeably strained. "What sort of irregularities?" "Mr. Graves will discuss that in person. Shall we expect you at 10? Another pause. "We'll be there." As the call ended, Walter gave Dom a questioning look. "Are you certain you want to proceed? Once we file these documents, there's no turning back." Dom removed his grandfather's pocket watch, checking the time with deliberate care. They made their choice. Now they'll face the consequences. Chapter 4. The Countermove. Walter Graves' office featured dark mahogany paneling and law books that hadn't been opened in a decade, an intentional aesthetic designed to intimidate. Dom sat with his back to the door, reviewing documents with Walter when Vanessa and Troy arrived promptly at 10. "Thank you for coming." Walter greeted them with professional detachment, gesturing to the chairs opposite Dom. Vanessa's eyes narrowed at the sight of her husband. "What is this about, Dom?" Dom turned slowly. The shock on their faces when they saw his calm demeanor was the first satisfaction he'd felt in months. "Just clearing up some oversights in our transaction," he replied evenly. Troy straightened his Italian silk tie. "If there were discrepancies, my team would have caught them." Walter opened a thick file. "Interesting you should mention your team, Mr. Lowell. Let's discuss Lowell Holdings LLC, established 6 months ago with Vanessa Palmer, not Reeves, listed as a silent partner." The color drained from Troy's face. Vanessa's hand moved instinctively to her throat. "That's confidential business information," Troy protested weakly. Walter continued as if Troy hadn't spoken. "Let's also discuss the questionable appraisal conducted by Alvin Mercer, whose license was suspended in Arizona for similar irregular valuations in cases where, coincidentally, you served as listing agent. You had us investigated?" Vanessa's voice quavered between outrage and fear. Dom leaned forward. "I had our transaction investigated. Standard business practice. The evidence suggests," Walter continued methodically, "a coordinated effort to defraud Mr. Reeves of his rightful equity through falsified documents, manipulated appraisals, and deliberate misrepresentation." Troy's professional demeanor cracked. "You can't prove intent." Walter slid a sealed envelope across the table. "This contains documentation ready for submission to the district attorney, real estate commission, and civil court. Fraud charges alone carry potential sentences of 5 to 7 years. Vanessa's face had turned ashen. "Dom, please." "I'm not done," Dom interrupted softly. "The house isn't the only asset you miscalculated." Walter produced another file. "Mr. Reeves wisely established a revocable trust 5 years ago, into which most of your marital assets were placed, with your signature, Mrs. Reeves, though you apparently didn't read the clause giving him sole discretionary control." Watching comprehension dawn on Vanessa's face, Dom felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not anger, just calm certainty. "You've been busy," she whispered. "While you were busy dismantling our marriage, I was busy protecting what I built," Dom corrected. "The house was a test, one you failed spectacularly." Troy attempted to regain control. "This is blackmail. This is negotiation," Walter countered. "Far more generous than you deserve." Dom stood, buttoning his suit jacket. "The terms are simple. Return the property and all funds from yesterday's transaction, plus a penalty of $200,000 to cover my investigations and legal fees. In exchange, these files remain sealed." $200,000, Troy sputtered. "That's extortion." "Consider it the price of your freedom," Dom replied calmly. "Otherwise, Walter files these documents at 5 o'clock today." Vanessa's eyes filled with desperate tears. "I don't have that kind of money, Dom. Everything I had went into the Lowell Holdings investment." Dom regarded her with detached curiosity. Then I suggest you and your cousin figure something out quickly. The clock is running. As he turned to leave, Vanessa grabbed his arm. Why are you doing this? You never cared this much about money. Dom gently removed her hand. This isn't about money, Vanessa. It's about choices and consequences. The following days unfolded according to Dom's meticulous plan. Troy liquidated investment accounts and borrowed against his brokerage portfolio. Vanessa surrendered her jewelry collection, including the anniversary diamonds Dom had given her that she'd claimed were lost the previous year. Walter documented every payment with clinical precision, building a record that would serve as insurance against future retaliation. Meanwhile, Dom moved into a downtown loft he'd purchased through his contracting business 3 years earlier, a contingency investment Vanessa had known nothing about. He immersed himself in work, accepting a major hospital renovation project that would keep his crew busy for months. One evening, as February snow blanketed the city, Dom's phone rang with Vanessa's number. He considered ignoring it before answering with a terse, "Yes?" "The money's been transferred," she said, her voice small. Troy had to sell his car and borrow from his parents. Walter confirmed receipt this afternoon. A long pause. "What happens now, Dom? Now you learn what it costs to betray someone who trusted you. Can we talk?" In person, the desperation in her voice was palpable. "I made a terrible mistake." "No, Vanessa," Dom interrupted. "You made a series of calculated decisions. Don't insult me by calling it a mistake. 15 years means nothing to you." Her voice cracked. "It meant everything to me," Dom corrected her. "That's the difference between us." After ending the call, Dom stood at his loft window overlooking the city lights, reflecting on the woman he had loved and the elaborate deception she had constructed. His thoughts were interrupted by a text message from an unknown number. "She doesn't know everything. We should talk." Dom stared at the message, considering its implications before typing a single response. "Parkview Cafe. Tomorrow. Noon." Chapter 5. Deeper Deceptions. The Parkview Cafe occupied the ground floor of a renovated factory building, its industrial aesthetic drawing a mix of professionals and artists. Dom arrived 20 minutes early, selecting a corner table with a clear view of both entrances. He ordered black coffee and waited, reviewing contracts on his tablet while monitoring the door. Troy arrived exactly at noon, his appearance markedly different from their previous encounters. Gone was the polished realtor in designer suits. The man who slid into the seat across from Dom wore rumpled khakis and a worn leather jacket, his formerly perfect hair now disheveled, dark circles beneath his eyes. "You look terrible," Dom observed dispassionately. Troy's laugh held no humor. "Financial ruin doesn't come with spa treatments." A server approached, but Troy waved her away. "I'll make this quick. Vanessa doesn't know the whole story." "I'm listening." Troy leaned forward, lowering his voice. "This wasn't just about your house or your marriage. Vanessa was a means to an end, access to your client list, your business connections." Dom's expression remained neutral, though his interest sharpened. "Explain." "I target specific neighborhoods, specific types of homes," Troy continued. "But more importantly, specific owners with valuable business assets. Your contracting company has exclusive relationships with 3 major developers. Those introductions are worth millions. So my wife was just collateral damage in your real scheme," Dom concluded. Troy's shoulders sagged. "It wasn't personal. It was to me." Dom sipped his coffee. "Why tell me this now?" "Because Vanessa is planning something." Troy glanced around nervously. "She thinks there's still money hidden somewhere. She's convinced you have offshore accounts, secret investments. She's hired someone to dig deeper." Dom set down his cup. "And you're warning me out of the goodness of your heart." "I'm warning you because she's becoming unstable. When the house deal collapsed, she blamed me. Said I promised her security, a fresh start." Troy pushed a napkin across the table. "This is the name of the person she hired. Former IRS investigator with questionable methods." Dom glanced at the name, Boyd Keller, before methodically tearing the napkin into tiny pieces. "Why should I believe anything you say?" Troy's eyes reflected genuine fear. "Because she threatened me too. Said if she goes down, she's taking everyone with her." He hesitated. "There's something else." She mentioned your sister's nonprofit, said there were irregularities in the accounting you helped set up. Dom's first genuine emotion in months surged through him, a cold fury that momentarily displaced his careful control. His younger sister, Amelia, ran a foundation for children with terminal illnesses, an organization born from the tragedy of losing her own daughter to leukemia. The foundation's reputation was spotless, its operations transparent, its mission personal and sacred to their family. If she comes anywhere near my sister's foundation, the deal is off, Dom said, his voice deadly quiet. The fraud charges will be the least of her concerns. Troy nodded quickly. That's why I'm here. This has gone too far. I wanted a real estate scheme, not whatever this is becoming. Dom studied Troy carefully, weighing the information against what he already knew. I'll handle Vanessa. You need to disappear, different city, different name. If I see or hear of you operating within 500 miles of here, everything goes to the authorities. Already planning on it, Troy replied. Phoenix got too hot. This city is radioactive. As Troy stood to leave, Dom stopped him with a final question. When did it start? With Vanessa. Troy hesitated. The real estate seminar was last March, but she approached me, not the other way around. Said she'd been looking for an exit strategy for over a year. The revelation settled like a stone in Dom's chest. March, when he'd been working 16-hour days on the riverfront project, when he'd missed their anniversary dinner because of a structural emergency, when he'd promised to make it up to her once the project was complete. After Troy departed, Dom remained at the table, mind working through this new information. He pulled out his phone and made 2 calls, one to Walter Graves, the other to Lena Winters. By the time he left the cafe, he had set in motion the next phase of his response. That evening, Dom drove to his sister Amelia's suburban home, where the sounds of children's laughter provided a stark contrast to the heaviness he carried. Amelia's husband, Preston, greeted him at the door with a warm handshake. Uncle Dom's here, Preston called, and 2 boys, 11 and 9, thundered down the stairs to tackle their favorite uncle. Easy, monsters, Dom laughed, the first genuine smile crossing his face in months. Let me at least get my coat off. Amelia appeared from the kitchen, wiping flour-covered hands on her apron. At 38, she carried herself with the quiet strength of someone who had faced the worst life could offer and continued forward. Her smile faltered when she saw Dom's expression. Boys, finish setting the table, she instructed. Once they'd scampered away, she led Dom to the study. What's wrong? Is this about Vanessa? Dom closed the door. I need to warn you. Vanessa might try to cause problems for the foundation. Amelia's eyes widened. Why would she? Desperation, Dom replied simply. I've taken precautions, but I wanted you prepared. Amelia studied her brother. You never told me what really happened with you two. She found someone else. Decided our life wasn't enough. That doesn't sound like the Vanessa I knew. Dom's laugh held no humor. Turns out neither of us knew her very well. Amelia placed a hand on his arm. What are you planning, Dom? You have that look. What look? The same one you had when Tommy Brennan stole my bike in 7th grade. He mysteriously lost his paper route, his spot on the basketball team, and his girlfriend within a month. Dom shrugged. Actions have consequences. Dom. Amelia's voice grew serious. Don't lose yourself in this. Revenge isn't worth. This isn't about revenge, Dom interrupted. It's about justice and protection. Dinner with Amelia's family provided a few hours of normality in Dom's carefully controlled existence. As he helped his nephews with science project questions and discussed Preston's new position at the university hospital, Dom was reminded of the family dinners he and Vanessa had hosted in happier times, the future they had planned that would never materialize. Later that night, as Dom returned to his loft, he received a text from Lena Winters. Subject made contact with B. Keller at the Sovereign Hotel bar. Surveillance photos and audio uploaded to secure server. Dom accessed the files, watching grainy images of Vanessa leaning close to a gray-haired man in an expensive suit, her body language intentionally intimate, her hand occasionally touching his arm for emphasis. The audio was fragmented but clear enough. Not just the house and business, hiding significant assets, offshore accounts, willing to pay premium percentage. Need conclusive evidence. Dom closed the files and made a final call to Walter. She took the bait. Proceed with Phase 3. The following morning, Walter Graves filed an emergency petition with the family court, citing evidence of potential fraud and requesting an immediate freeze on all joint assets pending investigation. Simultaneously, Lena Winters delivered a comprehensive dossier to Boyd Keller's office documenting his unauthorized practice in 3 states and questionable methods that violated federal privacy laws. By noon, Vanessa's access to every account was blocked, her credit card suspended, her remaining assets locked in legal limbo. By evening, Boyd Keller had withdrawn his services and left town, leaving Vanessa isolated and increasingly desperate. The trap Dom had meticulously crafted was closing. Chapter 6. The Turning Point. Late February brought an unexpected thaw, melting snow into slushy rivulets that streamed down city streets. Dom stood on the balcony of his loft, watching workers below remove weather protections from new landscape installations. Nature and commerce both emerging from winter's grip. His phone vibrated with a text from Walter Graves. Judge Thornton granted the expanded order. All assets frozen indefinitely. Hearing scheduled for March 15th. Dom replied with simple acknowledgement, pocketing his phone as he returned inside. The loft had begun to feel like home, its open spaces and industrial aesthetic the antithesis of the traditional Tudor he'd shared with Vanessa. He'd furnished it minimally but thoughtfully, with pieces crafted by artisans he'd met through various projects. No photographs, no mementos, nothing to connect it to his previous life. The intercom buzzed, an unexpected interruption to his Saturday solitude. The security desk announced Marianne Palmer, Vanessa's sister. Dom hesitated before authorizing her to come up, curious what brought her to his door. Marianne was Vanessa's younger sister by 3 years, with the same honey blonde hair but softer features. Unlike her sister's calculated polish, Marianne carried herself with authentic warmth that had made family holidays bearable even as Dom's marriage cooled. "This is unexpected," Dom greeted her as she stepped from the elevator. Marianne offered a tentative smile. "I wasn't sure you'd see me." "Family by marriage still counts," Dom replied, gesturing her inside. "Coffee, please." They moved to the kitchen island where Dom prepared 2 cups from his precision brewing setup. Marianne glanced around the space with undisguised curiosity. "Nice place. Very different from the house." Dom nodded. "That's the point." They settled into an uncomfortable silence as Dom waited for her to reveal the purpose of her visit. Finally, Marianne sighed heavily. "Vanessa's in trouble, Dom. I'm aware." "No, I mean beyond the legal stuff." Marianne cradled her coffee mug. "She showed up at my place at 3 this morning. She'd been drinking, talking wildly about conspiracy and persecution. I've never seen her like this." Dom maintained his neutral expression. "And what would you like me to do with this information?" Marianne's eyes flashed with sudden anger. "You could try basic human concern. 15 years together counts for nothing." It counted for exactly $127,500 according to Vanessa and her cousin. Dom replied evenly. "Their valuation, not mine." "God, you're cold." Marianne shook her head. "I knew you'd be angry, hurt even, but this calculated destruction isn't you, Dom." Dom set his cup down carefully. "You don't know what I am capable of when someone tries to dismantle my life, Marianne." Vanessa made her choices with full awareness of potential consequences. "She made terrible choices," Marianne agreed. "But this scorched earth campaign is destroying her." "That wasn't my intent," Dom replied honestly. "My intent was justice." Marianne studied him. "What happened to the man who spent 3 weekends building a wheelchair ramp for my neighbor's kid? Who organized the contractor alliance for Amelia's foundation? That man believed in second chances. That man was betrayed by his wife and her lover, who conspired to steal his home and business connections," Dom countered. "That man watched 15 years of partnership dissolve into calculation and deceit." Marianne's shoulders sagged. "I'm not defending what she did. I told her she was making a catastrophic mistake getting involved with Troy." She hesitated. "But there's something you should know about why it started." Dom's interest sharpened, though his expression remained impassive. I'm listening. Remember last year when Vanessa had that health scare? The abnormal mammogram. Dom nodded. Vanessa had undergone several tests before receiving the all-clear. She didn't tell you everything, Marianne continued. The initial diagnosis was much worse than she let on. Stage 2, possibly 3. She was convinced she was facing terminal illness. Dom's carefully constructed detachment cracked slightly. She told me it was a false alarm. It was eventually, but for 3 weeks she thought she was dying. Marianne leaned forward. She got obsessed with what would happen to you, how you'd manage alone, whether the house would become a burden. She convinced herself she needed to set things in order before telling you the truth. By selling our house out from under me, Dom's skepticism was evident. By creating liquidity and simplifying your life, Marianne corrected. It was misguided, but it came from a place of twisted concern. Then the final test came back clear, but by then she'd met Troy, who manipulated her fear and confusion. Dom processed this information against the timeline he'd constructed. That doesn't explain the affair, the deliberate deception. No, Marianne agreed. That was her failure, her weakness. Troy saw vulnerability and exploited it. By the time she realized she wasn't dying, she'd convinced herself your marriage was already over, that the compassionate thing was a clean break. There was nothing clean about what they tried to do, Dom observed quietly. I know. Marianne reached across the counter to touch his hand. The first human contact he'd accepted in months. I'm not asking you to forgive her. I'm asking you to consider that there might be a resolution that doesn't end in complete destruction. Dom withdrew his hand gently. Why are you really here, Marianne? Beyond concern for your sister? She hesitated. Vanessa mentioned something about Amelia's foundation. She was incoherent, but it sounded like she might try to cause problems there. Dom's expression hardened immediately. That would be inadvisable. I agree completely, Marianne said quickly. That's partly why I'm here. Whatever happens between you and Vanessa should stay between you and Vanessa. Dragging Amelia into this would be unforgivable. On that, we agree. After Marianne left, Dom stood at his window, watching the city lights emerge as dusk fell. The information about Vanessa's health scare provided context, but not absolution. Still, it complicated the narrative he'd constructed. The cold calculation he'd attributed to her actions now tinged with panic and misguided protection. Dom reached for his phone, hesitated, then made the call. Walter? I need a modification to our approach. The following morning, Dom drove to a modest apartment complex on the city's west side. Vanessa answered his knock with obvious surprise, her appearance a stark contrast to her usual polished image. Her hair hung limp, dark circles shadowed her eyes, and she wore an oversized sweatshirt that Dom recognized as one of his old ones she must have taken during the move. Dom, she breathed, momentarily speechless. What are you? May I come in? He asked formally. She stepped back, gesturing vaguely to the sparsely furnished living room. It's not much. It doesn't need to be, Dom replied, remaining standing. I'll be brief. Marianne visited me yesterday. Vanessa's face flushed. She had no right. She told me about the diagnosis. Dom interrupted. The real one. The color drained from Vanessa's face as quickly as it had appeared. She sank onto the sofa. Oh, why didn't you tell me? The question came out softer than Dom had intended. Because you would have put everything on hold, she answered, not meeting his eyes. The riverfront project, the expansion plans. You would have made my illness the center of your universe. That's what partners do, Vanessa. I know. Her voice cracked, and I didn't want to be the reason your dreams got derailed. Then when the final test came back negative, I was already deep in this alternative plan with Troy. She looked up finally. He made everything sound so reasonable, so clean. Dom studied the woman he had shared his life with. Now a stranger, yet hauntingly familiar. It was never going to be clean, Ness. The use of her nickname hung in the air between them, an unintentional intimacy in an otherwise formal conversation. I know that now, she whispered. I've lost everything that matters. Dom took a deep breath. The court hearing is scheduled for March 15th. Walter is preparing an amended proposal for asset division. Vanessa looked up, confusion evident. Amended how? The foundation stays completely off limits. Non-negotiable, Dom began. But the liquid assets will be divided more equitably than originally planned. You'll retain your car and personal possessions. The retirement accounts will be split according to contribution ratios. Disbelief crossed Vanessa's face. Why would you do this? Because complete destruction doesn't actually serve justice, Dom replied, echoing Marianne's words. And because regardless of how things ended, we shared 15 years that meant something. Tears filled Vanessa's eyes. Dom, this isn't reconciliation, he interrupted firmly. This is closure. A fair ending instead of a vindictive one. Vanessa nodded slowly. I understand. As Dom turned to leave, Vanessa called after him. For what it's worth, and I know it's worth very little now, I am truly sorry for what I did. Not just the betrayal, but for underestimating who you are. Dom paused at the door. Take care of yourself, Vanessa. Walking to his car, Dom felt the weight of months of anger and calculation begin to lift. Not into forgiveness, but into something adjacent to peace. The revenge he had meticulously crafted would be tempered by mercy, the final act recognizable as justice rather than destruction. His phone buzzed with a text from Lena Winters. Subject T observed purchasing one-way ticket to Miami from private airfield. Departing tomorrow. Dom smiled faintly. At least one player in this drama understood the wisdom of a clean exit. Chapter 7. Calculated Mercy. The morning of the court hearing dawned clear and cold, a late winter sun casting long shadows across the courthouse steps. Dom arrived early, reviewing documents with Walter in a conference room that smelled of furniture polish and anxiety. You're certain about these amendments? Walter asked for the third time, tapping the revised settlement offer. They're significantly more generous than our initial position. Dom nodded. Destruction isn't the goal, Walter. Never was. Could have fooled me, the attorney remarked dryly. That was the point. Dom straightened his tie, a new one, deep burgundy against a charcoal shirt. Nothing from his life with Vanessa remained in his daily existence. Pressure reveals character. I needed to see what emerged when pushed. Walter gathered his papers. Well, your soon-to-be ex-wife revealed plenty. Speaking of which, the PI confirmed Troy Lowell boarded a private charter to Miami yesterday. Apparently, he's exploring opportunities in South America. Smart man, Dom observed without emotion. When the ground becomes unstable, relocate. The courtroom was nearly empty when they entered, a small mercy in a process designed to dismantle lives in public view. Vanessa sat with her attorney, Patricia Walcott, a divorce specialist with a reputation for aggressive settlement negotiation. Dom noted Vanessa's attempt to project her former confidence. Tailored navy suit, hair styled immaculately, posture rigidly upright. Only the tremor in her hands as she arranged papers betrayed her anxiety. Judge Eleanor Thornton entered promptly at 9, her reputation for efficiency and no-nonsense approach evident in her brisk acknowledgement of the attorneys and immediate focus on the case file. I've reviewed the amended settlement proposal submitted this morning, she began, peering over reading glasses. Given the unusual circumstances and previously filed motions regarding potential fraud, I have questions before proceeding. For the next hour, Judge Thornton methodically dissected the settlement terms, questioning both attorneys about specific provisions. Dom watched Vanessa's face as Walter explained the more generous division of assets, noting her carefully controlled surprise. Mr. Reeves, Judge Thornton addressed him directly. The court records indicate serious allegations of fraud and conspiracy regarding the attempted property transfer. Yet this settlement effectively drops those allegations. Can you explain this apparent contradiction? Dom stood. Your Honor, pursuing those allegations would extend a painful process without serving justice. The amended settlement addresses the financial inequities without requiring further legal action. The judge studied him with shrewd assessment. That's unusually magnanimous, given the documented circumstances. Not magnanimous, Your Honor. Practical. Judge Thornton nodded thoughtfully before turning to Vanessa. Mrs. Reeves, the court notes your agreement to relinquish any claim to Reeves contracting and all its subsidiaries, as well as any connection to the Amelia Rees Foundation. Do you understand these terms are non-modifiable in future proceedings? Vanessa stood, her voice steady despite her evident tension. I do, Your Honor. I have no desire to interfere with either entity. After additional questioning and review, Judge Thornton approved the settlement with minimal modifications. While the court doesn't typically comment on the nature of dissolutions beyond legal requirements, I will note that ending a marriage with dignity often requires more strength than continuing one without it. The terms are approved as amended. The gavel's sharp report echoed with finality. 15 years of marriage, dissolved in 90 minutes of legal procedure. Outside the courtroom, Dom and Walter gathered their documents when Vanessa approached, her attorney hovering protectively nearby. Could we speak privately? She asked Dom, her composure still intact but fragile. Walter raised an eyebrow in question. Dom nodded reassurance. I'll meet you downstairs. When they were alone in the empty corridor, Vanessa spoke softly. The settlement. It's far more than I expected. It's what's fair, Dom replied simply. Fairness was always my goal, despite what you might have believed. Why did you let me keep my grandmother's lake house property? It wasn't part of our marital assets. Dom allowed himself a small smile. Because some things transcend balance sheets, Vanessa. That property represents your family heritage, not our failed marriage. Tears filled her eyes. I didn't deserve this consideration. Perhaps not, Dom acknowledged. But vengeance is exhausting, and I have a life to rebuild. Vanessa hesitated, then asked the question that clearly weighed most heavily. Will you ever forgive me? Dom considered this carefully. Forgiveness isn't a single moment, Vanessa. It's a process. I'm choosing to release the anger, but that's different from forgetting or reconciling. She nodded slowly. I understand. She reached in her purse and withdrew a small velvet box. I wanted to return this. It never felt right keeping it. Dom accepted the box, recognizing it immediately, his grandmother's sapphire ring that had been his first gift to Vanessa when they were dating. He'd assumed it had been sold or lost years ago. It reminded me of who we were before. She trailed off. Before I became someone I don't recognize anymore. Dom pocketed the box. We all become strangers to ourselves sometimes, Vanessa. The question is whether we find our way back. As they parted ways in the courthouse corridor, Dom felt the heaviness of months of calculation and controlled rage begin to dissipate. Not into forgiveness, that would require more time and distance than he currently possessed, but into something adjacent to peace. Outside, Walter waited by the car. All good, Dom nodded. It's done. You know, Walter observed as they drove away. In 15 years of handling divorces, I've never seen someone execute such a precise response to betrayal only to voluntarily step back from the killing blow. Dom watched the courthouse recede in the side mirror. It's not about mercy, Walter. It's about reclaiming who I am. That evening, Dom met Amelia for dinner at a quiet restaurant overlooking the river. She studied him carefully as he described the settlement and final interaction with Vanessa. So it's really over, she remarked. How do you feel? Dom considered the question. Like I'm standing in a newly framed structure. The foundation is solid, but everything else is yet to be built. Amelia smiled. That's very you, describing emotional states through construction metaphors. Occupational hazard, he acknowledged with a small smile. I have news, Amelia said, changing the subject. The foundation received an anonymous donation this morning. $200,000. Dom's eyebrows rose. Interesting timing. The transfer came from a Miami bank account. Amelia gave him a knowing look. Any thoughts on our mysterious benefactor? None whatsoever, Dom replied evenly, though his lips curved slightly. Though I believe in karma's ability to balance accounts. Later that night, as Dom stood on his loft balcony watching the city lights, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown Miami number. Debt paid. Account closed. No signature was necessary. Dom deleted the message without responding. Some chapters required no epilogue. Chapter 8. Reinvention. Spring arrived with surprising gentleness, coaxing reluctant blossoms from trees that had weathered a bitter winter. Dom immersed himself in the Riverfront Project, a massive mixed-use development that transformed a neglected industrial zone into sustainable community space. The symbolic parallel wasn't lost on him, reclaiming what had been abandoned, building something new from painful history. On a warm April morning, Dom walked the construction site with Benjamin Hollister, the project developer and one of Dom's oldest clients. At 62, Ben had the weathered face of someone who'd spent decades outdoors and the sharp eyes of a man who missed nothing. "Looking good, Dom," Ben observed, surveying the emerging structures. "Ahead of schedule and under budget. Your specialty." Dom nodded, checking structural details with practiced assessment. "We'll complete the community center phase by June, commercial spaces by September." "That's not what I meant," Ben clarified, giving Dom a pointed look. "You're looking better. Less like you might spontaneously combust." Dom smiled faintly. "Precise terminology is important in our business, Ben." "So, is recognizing when the foundation has stabilized after a shock," Ben countered. "The divorce is final." 6 weeks ago. Ben nodded thoughtfully. "Margaret and I hit a rough patch after 20 years. Different circumstances, but the same fundamental question: rebuild or demolish." Dom raised an eyebrow. "I didn't know that." "Few people did. Some renovations are private matters." Ben squinted up at the steel framework rising above them. "You're not wearing your ring anymore." "Progress." Dom glanced at his bare left hand. He'd removed the wedding band the day after the closing hearing, placing it in a small wooden box he'd crafted years ago. Not discarded, but archived. A piece of history rather than an active connection. "Small steps," Dom acknowledged. Their inspection complete, Dom returned to his office in the converted warehouse that housed Reeves Contracting. His assistant, Raymond, intercepted him with messages and the day's schedule. "The Westbrook permit finally cleared," Raymond reported, falling into step beside Dom. "And the Historical Preservation Committee approved our modification proposal for the Clark Street project." "Good. Schedule the subcontractor meeting for Thursday." Dom paused at his office door. "Anything else?" Raymond hesitated. "Ms. Santiago from Urban Planning called again about the community board position. Said they need your decision by Friday." Dom nodded. "Tell her I'll call this afternoon." The community development board position had been offered 3 weeks earlier, an appointed role overseeing neighborhood revitalization projects. In previous years, Dom would have declined immediately, citing business demands. Now, the prospect of contributing to civic planning beyond commercial interests held unexpected appeal. As Dom settled at his desk, his phone buzzed with a message from Lena Winters, quarterly update as requested. Subject V, maintaining residence at Westside Apartment. Employment at Palmer Design Stable. No contact with Subject T, who remains in Bogota. Surveillance concluded as contracted. Dom replied with simple acknowledgement and a transfer of the final payment. The monitoring had been a precaution rather than continued vendetta, insurance against potential retaliation as emotion settled. With Troy established in Colombia and Vanessa rebuilding her life quietly, the chapter could truly close. Later that afternoon, Dom drove to the lake house property he'd recently purchased, 40 acres of wooded shoreline with a neglected cabin that most buyers had considered tear-down material. Dom had seen potential in its honest craftsmanship and scenic isolation. 3 weekends of work had transformed the main structure into a comfortable retreat. The property offered what his downtown loft couldn't: space to breathe, to build, to reimagine. As sunset painted the lake in amber and gold, Dom sat on the rebuilt dock, considering the parallel reconstructions underway, the physical spaces he was reclaiming and the personal identity he was redefining. For months, he had been someone driven by calculated response to betrayal. Now that framework had served its purpose, leaving space for something new to emerge. His phone rang. Amelia's number. "Just checking if you're coming to Zachary Science Fair tomorrow," she said when he answered. "He's convinced his favorite uncle will be impressed by his sustainable energy model." "Wouldn't miss it," Dom assured her, "though I maintain that favorite uncle is a low bar when I'm his only uncle." Amelia laughed. "True, but you've set that bar pretty high anyway." She paused. "How's the lake house coming along?" "Structure sound. Starting on interior work next weekend." You should host a small gathering once it's finished. Nothing fancy, just family, a few friends. Dom considered this. Social connections had contracted during his marriage dissolution. His focus narrowed to legal strategy and business obligations. The prospect of deliberately expanding that circle again felt both unfamiliar and necessary. I might do that, he agreed. Once the place is presentable. Good. Amelia's approval was evident. Oh, and Marian called me today. Apparently, she's been asked to coordinate the children's art therapy program for the foundation. I thought you should know before I proceed. Dom tensed slightly at the connection to Vanessa, then consciously relaxed. Marianne's qualified. Her art therapy work at the hospital is excellent. You're sure it's not complicated? Life is complicated, Amelia, Dom replied. Doesn't mean we avoid valuable contributions. After ending the call, Dom watched darkness settle over the lake, the distant lights of other cabins appearing like earthbound stars along the shoreline. The property represented his first major personal investment since the divorce, a deliberate choice to create something exclusively his, unconnected to past partnerships or shared dreams. The following week brought an unexpected encounter as Dom reviewed material samples at an upscale design showroom. He turned from a display of sustainable bamboo flooring to find himself face-to-face with Vanessa, who appeared equally startled by their meeting. For a moment, neither spoke, the showroom's ambient music filling the awkward silence. Dom noted her professional attire. Clearly there on business for her interior design firm rather than personal shopping. Dom, she finally greeted him, composure recovered. I didn't expect to see you here. Likewise, he replied evenly. Working on the Anderson project? She nodded. Final selections for the lake house remodel. Another pause, less strained than the first. Dom noticed she looked healthier than at the courthouse. The haunted look replaced by something more settled, if not entirely carefree. How have you been? The question felt oddly formal for someone he'd shared a bathroom with for 15 years. Managing, she answered honestly. The apartment's small but sufficient. The firm kept me on despite everything. Dom nodded. Good. That's good. And you? Raymond mentioned you bought property on the lake. Just a small cabin. Needed work. Vanessa smiled faintly. Your specialty. The conversation lapsed into silence again, both aware of the multiple meanings layered in those simple words. Finally, Vanessa gestured to her sample cart. I should finish these selections. The client's waiting. Of course. Dom stepped aside. As she moved past him, he added, I heard Marianne's working with Amelia's foundation. Vanessa paused. She is. It means a lot to her. To both of us, actually. She'll do good work there. Vanessa studied him carefully. You didn't have to approve that, after everything. The foundation's work shouldn't be limited by our personal history, Dom replied simply. Marianne has valuable skills to offer. Something like respect flickered in Vanessa's eyes. Thank you. They parted with formal politeness. The encounter brief but significant. The first unplanned interaction without legal intermediaries or agenda. As Dom watched her walk away, he realized the sight of her no longer triggered the cold fury or deep hurt that had driven his actions for months. In its place was something more complex. A muted acknowledgement of what had been lost alongside recognition of the necessity of that loss. That evening, Dom accepted the community board position with a brief call to Elena Santiago. The 2-year appointment would begin the following month, requiring regular participation in neighborhood development decisions throughout the city's underserved districts. We're delighted you've accepted, Elena told him. Your practical experience with sustainable renovation will be invaluable to communities seeking revitalization without displacement. I'm looking forward to it, Dom replied, surprised to find the statement genuine rather than merely polite. As spring deepened into summer, Dom divided his time between expanding business projects, the lake house renovation, and his new civic responsibilities. The cabin gradually transformed from neglected shelter to personalized retreat, its spaces reflecting Dom's preferences rather than compromises with another's taste. He built custom shelving for books he'd finally allowed himself time to read, installed a workshop for woodworking projects, and constructed a deck that captured both sunrise and sunset views. In late June, following Amelia's persistent encouragement, Dom hosted a small gathering at the nearly completed lake house. The guest list remained modest. Amelia's family, Walter and his wife, several key employees and their partners, neighbors he'd befriended during the renovation. The occasion marked not just the cabin's completion, but a deliberate step into the life he was constructing beyond betrayal and its aftermath. As twilight fell, Dom stood at the edge of the gathering, observing the easy conversations unfolding across his new space. Amelia appeared beside him, offering a glass of bourbon. "Successful event," she noted, clinking her glass against his. "The place looks amazing." "It's getting there," Dom acknowledged, surveying the work still to be done with a contractor's critical eye. "I wasn't talking about the house," Amelia clarified with a meaningful look. Though that too, Dom understood her meaning. "Small steps. Sometimes that's the only way forward," she agreed. One calculated decision after another. Walter joined them, nodding appreciation at the craftsmanship evident throughout the space. "You've created something remarkable here, Dom. A complete transformation from what you started with." "That seems to be the theme lately," Dom replied with a small smile. Later, as guests departed and quiet settled over the lake house, Dom sat alone on the dock, watching moonlight trace silver patterns across the water. The revenge that had consumed his focus had fulfilled its purpose. Justice delivered through careful calculation rather than emotional reaction. Now that account was settled, leaving room for reinvention that honored who he had been while creating space for who he might become. The water lapped gently against the shore, nature's quiet reminder that even after the most violent storms, equilibrium eventually returns. Different, perhaps, but stable in its new formation. Chapter 9. Balance Restored. Autumn painted the lakeside property in brilliant hues of amber and crimson, the cabin's weathered exterior now restored to its original warmth against the seasonal backdrop. Dom stood on the expanded deck, coffee mug in hand, watching mist rise from the water in ghostly tendrils as sunrise broke over the eastern shore. The solitude no longer carried the sharp edge of isolation that had characterized his early post-divorce months. His phone buzzed with a message from Elena Santiago. Proposal approved unanimously. Funding secured for the Eastside Community Center renovation. We're ready when your team is. The community board position had evolved from obligation to passion project as Dom recognized the opportunity to apply his expertise to neighborhoods needing revitalization rather than gentrification. The East Side project would transform an abandoned recreation center into a multi-purpose facility serving an under-resourced community. Job training programs, childcare facilities, and affordable healthcare services under one sustainable roof. The professional satisfaction of this new direction contrasted sharply with the vindictive focus that had consumed him a year earlier. The balanced ledger of justice had freed him to redirect his considerable skills toward construction rather than calculation. Dom's contemplation was interrupted by the sound of tires on gravel. Hank Dobson's truck pulling into the drive. His former neighbor had become an unexpected friend during the divorce aftermath. His straightforward nature and practical wisdom a counterbalance to Dom's tendency toward methodical analysis. "Brought those heritage apple saplings I mentioned," Hank called, climbing from his truck. "Perfect planting weather this weekend." Dom set down his coffee mug and moved to help unload the young trees. "Appreciate it. I prepared the north slope like you suggested." As they worked together positioning the saplings for optimal growth, Hank nodded toward the cabin. "Place is unrecognizable from when you bought it. Got plans for the boathouse next." "Winter project," Dom confirmed. "Converting the upper level to a guest apartment." Hank paused, leaning on his shovel. "Planning for visitors? That's progress." Dom smiled slightly at the observation. Like Amelia, Hank had witnessed Dom's gradual emergence from self-imposed isolation, offering quiet encouragement without pressure. "Speaking of progress," Hank continued casually, "Martha's book club friend Diana asked about you again." Dom shook his head. "Still not interested in being someone's second husband project." "Fair enough," Hank conceded, "though not everyone's carrying Vanessa's particular baggage." They completed the planting in companionable silence. The physical labor a welcome counterpoint to Dom's typically cerebral focus. As Hank prepared to leave, he handed Dom a folded newspaper clipping. Thought you might find this interesting. From last week's business section, Dom unfolded the paper to find a small article detailing the bankruptcy of Pinnacle Luxury Properties in Miami. The accompanying photo showed Troy Lowell being escorted from a courthouse, his once confident expression replaced by haggard defeat. Karma delivers eventually, Hank observed, though I suspect it had some help in this case. Dom scanned the article, noting the charges of fraudulent practices and misappropriation of client funds. Some lessons are more expensive than others. You're not curious how it all unraveled? Dom refolded the clipping, handing it back to Hank. Not particularly. That chapter's closed. Hank studied him with knowing assessment. That's how I know you've moved on for real. 6 months ago, you'd have wanted every detail of his downfall. After Hank departed, Dom returned to the deck, considering the property stretch before him. The saplings just planted would take years to mature, the boathouse renovation would occupy winter months, the garden beds would need systematic preparation for spring planting. Long-term projects requiring patience and vision rather than immediate gratification. His phone rang. Walter Graves calling with quarterly updates on business investments and pending contracts. Their professional relationship had evolved as legal necessities receded and strategic planning advanced. The foundation audit completed successfully, Walter reported after covering business matters. Amelia asked me to mention that Marion Palmer's art therapy program has secured additional funding through year-end. Good to hear, Dom replied. The program's making real impact. Walter hesitated before adding, I ran into Vanessa last week at the Symphony fundraiser. She asked about you. Dom felt the familiar twinge, fainter now but not entirely absent, at the mention of her name. Professional curiosity or personal? Hard to determine, Walter answered honestly. She seemed settled. Mentioned she's partnered with another designer to launch a small firm, focusing on sustainable renovations. Fitting, Dom observed without elaboration. After concluding the call, Dom reviewed project timelines for the East Side Community Center, making notes for Monday's planning meeting. The professional rhythm had stabilized into productive focus rather than workaholic escape, his schedule now balanced between business obligations, personal projects, and newly reclaimed social connections. Late that afternoon, Dom drove into the city for dinner with Amelia's family, followed by his nephew Zachary's school orchestra concert. These family obligations, once relegated to secondary importance behind work demands, had become anchoring points in his reconstructed life. The following week brought an unexpected development as Dom reviewed contractor bids for the community center project. Elena Santiago stopped by his office with a portfolio of design concepts. The committee has a special request, she explained, spreading architectural renderings across his desk. We'd like to include a dedicated art therapy space in the East Wing, similar to what's been so successful at Amelia's foundation. Dom reviewed the designs with professional interest. Feasible within budget if we modify these structural elements. Who's consulting on the specialized requirements? Elena hesitated. That's the request part. Marion Palmer recommended her firm for the interior design. Apparently, they've developed expertise in therapeutic spaces through the foundation work. Dom's expression remained neutral as he connected the implications. Her firm meaning Palmer Reeves Design, Elena confirmed. Marianne and Vanessa. The committee was impressed with their portfolio, but given your history, she trailed off delicately. Dom considered the situation with careful objectivity. The professional intersection was inevitable in their specialized field and smaller city. The question was whether past personal history should override present professional opportunity for the community project and for all parties involved. Their qualifications are appropriate, he stated finally. If they submit the most competitive bid, the committee should proceed accordingly. Elena studied him carefully. You're sure? No one would question recusal given the circumstances. The project deserves the best resources available, Dom replied simply. Personal history is irrelevant to that assessment. The decision crystallized something important in Dom's ongoing reconstruction: the ability to separate past wounds from present possibilities, to recognize that holding others in suspended judgment served no purpose once justice had been satisfied. 2 days later, Dom received the formal notification that Palmer Reeves Design had indeed secured the contract for the specialized therapy spaces within the community center. The project timeline would necessitate coordinated planning between their firm and Reeves contracting over the coming months. The following week, Dom arrived early for the initial project coordination meeting at the community board offices. He was reviewing materials when Marianne and Vanessa entered the conference room together, their professional demeanor momentarily faltering upon seeing him already seated. "Dom," Marianne recovered first, extending her hand. "Good to see you." "Likewise," he replied, shaking her hand before acknowledging Vanessa with a professional nod. "Congratulations on securing the contract." Vanessa maintained composed professionalism. "Thank you. We're excited about the project's potential." As other team members arrived, the meeting proceeded with focused efficiency, each party contributing expertise to the collaborative planning process. Dom noted the evident partnership between Marianne and Vanessa, their complementary skills creating something neither could have built alone. The observation carried no bitterness, only intellectual recognition of effective reconstruction. When the meeting concluded, Dom gathered his materials as the room gradually emptied. Vanessa approached his end of the conference table, professional portfolio clutched perhaps too tightly. "I want to assure you that our personal history won't affect the project," she began formally. "We're completely committed to professional boundaries." Dom nodded. "I never questioned that. Thank you for not objecting to our firm's selection," she continued. "It would have been understandable if you had." Dom considered his response carefully. "The project deserves the best resources. Your firm's qualifications were clearly superior for these specialized spaces." Vanessa studied him with careful assessment. "You've changed." "We all have," Dom replied evenly. "Necessity rather than choice, perhaps, but change nonetheless." A moment of understanding passed between them, recognition of separate journeys taken since their paths diverged. Not reconciliation or even friendship, but acknowledgement of individual reconstruction following shared demolition. "The lake house looks wonderful," Vanessa offered, shifting slightly to safer conversational ground. "Marian showed me photos from Amelia's gathering." "It's coming along," Dom acknowledged. Different direction than originally planned, but better suited to current needs. The double meaning hung unaddressed between them. As autumn deepened into winter, the community center project advanced according to schedule, the professional intersection of Dom and Vanessa's separate businesses managed with careful boundaries and mutual respect. Occasional coordination meetings required direct interaction, each encounter becoming progressively less laden with unspoken history. On a snow-covered December evening, Dom worked late at the community center site, reviewing installation details for specialized infrastructure before concrete pours scheduled for the following day. The building stood partially enclosed against winter elements, temporary lighting casting long shadows across emerging spaces. He was examining electrical conduit placements when he realized he wasn't alone. Vanessa stood in the doorway of what would become the art therapy suite, architectural plans illuminated by her tablet screen. "Sorry," she said when he noticed her. "I didn't realize anyone was still here. I wanted to check measurements before tomorrow's installations." "No problem," Dom replied. "I'm doing the same with the electrical pathways." They worked in separate areas for nearly an hour, the professional focus creating neutral space between personal histories. Finally, as Dom prepared to leave, Vanessa approached with a technical question about ceiling height modifications. After resolving the issue, she hesitated before saying, "I heard about the expanded community garden you're incorporating behind the center. Marian mentioned you're designing it yourself." Dom nodded. "Using companion planting principles for natural pest management and maximized yields. Similar to what you planned for our backyard," Vanessa observed quietly. "The design you worked on for 3 winters." The reference to their shared past hung in the cold air between them. Dom considered his response carefully. Some good ideas deserve second chances in better contexts, he replied finally. Vanessa absorbed this with thoughtful consideration. I've been seeing someone, she offered unexpectedly. A professor at the community college. Nothing serious yet, but healthier than before. Dom recognized the disclosure for what it was. Not jealousy inducement, but confirmation of separate paths forward. That's good, Vanessa. I hope it works out for you. And you? She asked carefully. Amelia mentioned you've been spending time with someone from the Historical Preservation Committee. Elena, Dom confirmed. Early stages. Taking it slowly. Vanessa nodded, a complex emotion crossing her face. Not jealousy, but something adjacent to closure. She seems intelligent. Grounded. She is, Dom agreed simply. As they prepared to leave the construction site, Vanessa paused at the doorway. Do you think we could have fixed it? If I had made different choices? The question carried no manipulation or agenda, just honest curiosity about alternate realities now foreclosed. Dom considered this carefully. I think by the time choices became visible, foundations had already weakened beyond repair. Not just your choices, mine too. Your choices? Vanessa questioned with genuine surprise. Prioritizing projects over partnership. Assuming stability required no maintenance, Dom acknowledged. The betrayal was yours, but the neglect was mutual. The admission represented not absolution, but perspective, hard-earned through months of reconstruction. Not of their marriage, which remained properly dismantled, but of their separate understandings of what had transpired. Thank you for saying that, Vanessa said quietly. It doesn't change what happened, but it acknowledges the complexity. Dom finished for her. Justice requires truth, not just judgment. As they walked to their separate vehicles through gently falling snow, Dom recognized the balanced ledger his careful calculations had finally achieved. Not vindictive destruction, but calibrated consequence, creating space for both accountability and reconstruction. Spring arrived with the community center nearing completion, its transformed spaces bearing little resemblance to the abandoned structure that had preceded it. Dom walked through the nearly finished art therapy suite where Vanessa and Marianne directed installation of specialized features. Wall systems that accommodated various therapeutic modalities, lighting designed for sensory-sensitive occupants, surfaces selected for both durability and comfort. We're ahead of schedule, Marianne noted as Dom reviewed the installation progress. Everything's coming together beautifully. Dom nodded approval. The integration between structural elements and specialized functions is seamless. Your firm's expertise made a significant difference. Vanessa accepted the professional acknowledgement with quiet confidence. The foundation work provided valuable insights into what these spaces truly need to function effectively. The grand opening ceremony 2 weeks later brought community members, funding partners, and project contributors together in celebration of the transformed space. Dom stood at the periphery, observing the culmination of collaborative effort with professional satisfaction. Elena joined him, her presence comfortable at his side after months of cautious dating. You should be center stage, she noted. This wouldn't have happened without your involvement. Dom shook his head slightly. The project succeeded because everyone contributed appropriate expertise at the right time. My role was just one piece. As community members explored the new facilities, Dom watched Vanessa and Marianne conducting tours of the therapeutic spaces. The professional respect their firm had earned was evident in the attention their explanations received. Later, as the celebration wound down, Dom found himself alone in the main corridor when Vanessa approached. The contractors are finishing the last details in the East Wing, she informed him professionally before adding, It's really remarkable what you've helped create here. What we've created, Dom corrected. Every contributor brought necessary elements. Vanessa studied him with careful assessment. A year ago, I wouldn't have believed we could work on the same project without conflict. A year ago, revenge seemed more important than reconstruction, Dom acknowledged. And now? Dom considered the question thoughtfully. Now I understand that the most effective response to destruction isn't more destruction. It's building